I want to spend a few minutes and talk about the implications of the various relationships depicted on this model. If you haven't watched the previous video, which describes the model itself, it's probably a real good idea if you go to the focus page here and actually watch that video. Otherwise, this particular video is not likely to make a lot of sense. And this is, in fact, a re-recording of the video I made yesterday. I got a new version of the software I make videos with, and the new version records background system audio, and I tried to add a background soundtrack to it, and it was way too loud and annoying, so no background tracks today. Just we're doing it as it is. So in terms of the employed dollars actually creating demand dollars and the demand dollars returning through this flow to create employed dollars, if we set employed dollars and demand dollars each to 1, just because that's the way I'm setting it to initialize the model in a stable state, and I run it, it's very much akin to watching paint dry, because employed dollars and demand dollars are equal and have a value of 1, and everything else is 0. So not the flow is simply conserved at this point. And though this flow can be messed up or altered through a number of different interactions or actions taken by those that influence the flow, the first one that I'd like to talk about is those individuals who have dollars from employment. They can in fact choose to spend them in a manner that creates demand, or they can extract them from the flow by saving money. And so I don't have to talk about banking systems at the moment. Here they just take money, they choose to take a portion of their money and they put it in a can and bury it in the backyard for some time in the future. The only point that I want to make is they're extracting something from the flow. So let me go down here and simply say that this dollars, there's a 5% portion of it which is extracted on an annual basis. So if I implement that and then look at the impact of that, notice that both the employed dollars and the demand dollars begin a decline, because the extract, which is over here, the extract is 5% of 1, which is just 0.5, and it's being extracted out of the system so that it causes the economy to in fact decline over time, because the flow is no longer conserved. Every cycle, 5% of the money that's in the cycle is extracted. Now, as I said, it could be extracted because they're choosing to save it, or because they're choosing to pay down existing debt. Money can be extracted from the flow because of a trade imbalance. So, and that's all lumped together, I now understand, and it's called aggregate demand leakage. That just the aggregate demand leaks out of the system because of actions of those involved in the system. So because the economy is declining, then there's a couple of ways to compensate for that. The people can in fact stop extracting money from the economy, though if they don't choose to do that, the only way that the funds can get back into the economy is for the government to spend money back into the economy, and we'll go ahead and make that the same as what's being saved, and run it again, and we'll notice that the economy has in fact been restored, but every year there's deficit spending, in that the government is spending money that it doesn't have back into the economy to maintain the economy. Now typically the government, in fact, levies taxes on people, and if we, in this model, taxes on the employed dollars would in fact provide revenue to the government. This stock, as it accumulates over time, is national debt. On a period by period basis, it's the annual deficit spending. If we go ahead and levy taxes and we say that the e-tax rate is 20%, and so that this tax rate, taxing this employed dollars back to the national debt, is 20%. Well, it's now taking care of the national debt because the government's not spending money, but those taxes, in fact, employed is in fact having a negative impact on the economy. And the way to compensate for that is for the government to in fact spend more money, so that if we increase the government spending and run the model again, we'll see that the economy has recovered to its initial state. The government spending is at this rate on an annual basis, so that the national debt is increasing year after year after year. So and the same kinds of things can happen over here in terms of the producers taking profits or retained earnings out of the flow, and the government leveling taxes on the producers. It will have the same kinds of impacts that I just demonstrated with employed dollars. And what it leads me to understand is that the model can't function. In other words, the government has to have deficit spending on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, the economy will naturally decline. And I didn't realize this before. So that no matter what it does in terms of altering taxes, whatever it levies in terms of taxes, it needs to respend back into the economy. Otherwise, the economy, in fact, declines over time. Now, I want to go ahead and continue to evolve this model so that it includes the trade balance or imbalance and what happens to the economy with borrowing and repayment of debt, so that these two items are here, and I know that I need to include them. And the other part that I talked about in the previous video, in terms of, I know that government spending isn't, there are multiple types of things that the government spends money on. This is direct purchases or government contracts, things that directly result in demand. The other kinds of things that it spends is what it spends for Social Security, in fact, is provided to individuals, and individuals could, in fact, save or pay down debt with part of that, and part of it they could use to contribute to the aggregate demand. And then there is part of it where the government actually employs people, so that would be a direct contribution to this item. And I've now come to the conclusion that I could add those other two pieces and further increase the detail in this model, though I'm not sure that it actually makes it any more meaningful, because there are simply additional parameters to be set. But the model behaves in the same way that it does with these pieces. So that, in other words, I'm not trying to model the exact values that are happening in the economy in the past, at the moment, or in the future. I'm simply trying to understand the implications of the interactions with the money flows, and the way that altering that flow has an impact on the economy, which is the amount of money that's from my perspective, at least at this point, is the continuing flow of dollars to create demand, and those and those demand dollars, in fact, being used to create employed dollars. So hopefully this helps, and if it does, if there are questions, please go ahead and post them to the discussion, and we'll continue to ferret out understanding. So, bye.